नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स। नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स। नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स। Today we will be beginning the study of the book 8 of the Buddha's Dhamma, and so far we have completed the 7 books of the Buddha's Dhamma, and we have seen various teachings of the Buddha as taught by Baba Sahib Ambedkar in this book Buddha's Dhamma. And now we come to the book 8, and the book 8 is about the Buddha, but the Buddha as the man who was Siddhartha Gautama. And this book is divided into 3 parts and an epilogue. So we have quite a distance to cover in the book 8. So as I said, the book is titled as The Man Who Was Siddhartha Gautama. So it comes back to the Buddha again. And one of the things that we have noticed in the life of the Buddha is a tremendous love for the life of Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar. Is a tremendous love for the Buddha, and his love for the Buddha and the Buddhism goes back to his young days when he was presented the book on Buddha by Dada Kiduskar very early on in his life. That time he was only 16, and he received the book, and he has later commented in his speech in Nagpur on 14th October about how that book left an impression of the Buddha on him that lasted throughout his life. And therefore, this after discussing all the nuances, all the teachings of the Buddha in terms of its in its many forms, in different categories like Dhamma, Sadhamma, and various paths, discussing, going at length on describing the teachings of the Buddha in a multi faceted ways. In the book 8, Baba Sahib Ambedkar has come back to the very personality of the Buddha himself. And I think when we follow the Buddha's teachings, Buddha being the embodiment of the Dhamma itself, how that Dhamma has manifested in the life of the Buddha is very important. And therefore, to study the Buddha as the man who was Siddhartha Gautama is a very important sort of a teaching for us, because it grounds us into our own bodies, what it means to be like the Buddha. And I think this book 8 has a very special meaning for all of us, because we are all human beings, and the Buddha is often talked in terms of somebody who has gone beyond, maybe in terms of his achievements. He has gone beyond, but he was still a human being, and he was in a physical form just like us, all of us. And there is a possibility that we all can be like him, and that possibility is seen in the life of the Buddha. So and if we can see it in the life of the other human beings just like us, we can see that very possibility in our own lives. And I think that's why Baba Sahib Ambedkar has come back to the Buddha as a man, after discussing his teaching in such a vast and in such a detailed manner. So I think that's what we are supposed to come back to all the time, to the Buddha, and to take an example from Baba Sahib's life. He was always coming back to the Buddha, and he was always thinking about the Buddha. He was very much he had a very strong affinity with the Buddha. He has a very strong, what is called the Shraddha, as we have seen, in the Buddha, in a sense of somebody who he aspired in his own human life, with its all aspects. So as Baba Ambedkar has divided this book into a book, three parts. Part one, his personality. So the part one is about his physical personality, about his complete physical being, and part two is about his quality of his humanity. And I think this is very interesting that Baba Ambedkar has brought up this quality of humanity in the Buddha. And part three is about his likes and dislikes. So what Buddha, liked and what Buddha disliked. And finally, the book is going to end with an epilogue, which is also very interesting to look at. And we are going to study the epilogue as well. So let me begin with the book 8 now, and the part 1, which is divided into 3 subparts. The subpart 1 is titled as his personal appearance. So it talks about the personal appearance of the Buddha. The subpart 2 talks about the testimony of the eyewitnesses. And subpart 3 talks about his capacity to lead. So what I thought is, because this is a descriptive sort of part 1 is a descriptive part. So what we will do is we will accordingly treat the part in terms of descriptive narration. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read it through and through, because there are 3 pages. And if there is anything by the way of what we can learn, I'm going to gloss over that, because it's being very descriptive about talking about the physical appearance of the Buddha. So let's begin to read his personal appearance. From all accounts, the Blessed Lord was a handsome person. His form was like the peak of a golden mountain. He was tall, well built, with a pleasing appearance. His long arms and lion gait, his bull-like eyes and his beauty, bright like gold, his broad chest attracted everyone to him. His brows, his forehead, his mouth, or his eyes, his body, his hands, his feet, or his gait, whatever part of him anyone beheld, that at once riveted his eyes. Whoever saw him could not help being struck with his majesty and his strength, his splendid beauty surpassing all other men. The verse number 6 is very interesting. On seeing him, he who was going elsewhere stood still, and whoever was standing followed him. He who was walking gently and bravely ran quickly, and he who was sitting at once sprang. So you see, the Buddha's personality, as it's described in the verse number 6, is something that that affected every human being. So it struck them. If you are walking gently, you will walk fast. If you are walking fast, you will reduce your speed. And if you are sitting, you will stand up. So you see, this was the personality of the Buddha. His personality was so impactful on anybody who ever came in contact with him. Of those who met him, some reverenced him with their hands. So somebody who met him, they just reverenced the Buddha with their hands. There were various ways of paying respect to the Buddha, as we are going to see in this verse number 7. Others in worship saluted him with their heads. So some people saluted him with their heads. Others in worship saluted him with their heads. Some addressed him with affectionate words. Not one went on without paying him homage. He was loved and respected by all. Men as well as women were ever ready to hear him. So you see, such was the personality of the Buddha that people were ever ready to listen to what the Buddha is trying to say. His voice was singularly sweet and deep as a drum. This is the voice of the Buddha was very deep and very sweet. and it's likened with the drum, lovely, vibrant, and eloquent. See, some of these qualities of the Buddha, of his personality, we might not be able to, have that same physical form. But you see, what we can do is, try to speak the way he spoke with such a sonority. Like how did the Buddha speak? You see, his voice was singularly sweet and deep as a drum, lovely, vibrant, and eloquent. It made his speech as though it was heavenly music. So, how was the Buddha's speech? So, the Buddha's speech was like a music from the heaven. So, these are some of the qualities of the Buddha's, personality, of his physical being, and of his, the way he spoke. So, I'm going to read the verse number 6 and 7 again to emphasize the point. On seeing him, he who was going elsewhere stood still, and whoever was standing followed him. He who was walking gently and gravely ran quickly, and he who was sitting at once sprang up on their legs. Of those who met him, some reverenced him with their heads, hands, others in worship saluted him with their heads, and some addressed him with affectionate words. Not one went on without paying him homage. He was loved and respected by all. Men as well as women were ever ready to hear him. His voice was singularly sweet and deep as a drum, lovely and vibrant.
So you don't know
That was the quality of voice. And his voice was singularly sweet and deep as a drum, lovely, vibrant, and eloquent. It made his speech as though it was heavenly music. His very tones convinced the hearer, and his looks inspired awe. You see, the way the Buddha spoke, the tonality in his voice, the up and downs in his voice was itself convincing to the hearer. So that's how the Buddha spoke, in a way that convinced the hearers. His voice had got certain sonority about it, certain sweetness about his certain musicality about his voice, and his looks was inspired the awe in those who behold the Buddha. His personality alone sufficed to make him not only a leader but a god to the hearts of his fellows. So see, that is how the Buddha looked. He looked in such a way. He was, his personality was such a way that his personality itself convinced the listeners to listen to him. And his personality was sufficed to make him not only a leader but a god to the hearts of his fellows. So whenever people looked at the Buddha, they could not but listen to the Buddha's words. And the verse number 13, very short, single sentence. When he spoke, he obtained hearers. So the moment the Buddha started speaking, the people were at once glued to what the Buddha was saying. So when he uttered the word, he obtained the hearers. Very, very beautiful phrase that we can see here in the verse number 13. It mattered little what he said. He said in such a way, he said it with such a strong conviction in the truth that it mattered little what he said. He influenced the emotions and bent whoever listened to his will. So that was the magnetic power of the Buddha's speech, that he could bend whoever listened to him to his own will. Now we know that the Buddha had such a charismatic personality, and he could mesmerize the people. He could convince the people. He could talk to the people in a way that would convince them. But we know that the Buddha was doing all these things to bring the people on the path of the Dhamma. He had no personal interest to create the followers. And that is the beauty of the Buddha, that he was not trying to seek to convert the people into his personality. He was trying to make people walk on the path of the Dhamma. He was, as Baba Ambedkar said, he was a Margadata. He could create in the minds of his hearers that what he taught was not only a verity, but the very hope of their salvation. How many people can talk like this today? Talk in a way that will convince the people that it's not only true, but that's the only hope of their salvation. The Buddha's Dhamma, as he taught when he was alive, he could teach in a way that people could feel that that's the only way of their salvation. His hearers could recognize in his words the truth that makes of slaves free man. So people at that time, when they listened to the Buddha, they could recognize that his very words were for their freedom from the slavery. And I think this is very interesting when we see this quality of freedom, even in the speeches of Baba Sahib Ambedkar, or when we read the Buddhist text, or when we read the Buddha and his Dhamma, it has got that power, and we could recognize it when we engage with the Buddha and his Dhamma. It's tremendous power to free us from the slavery. And I think that's what we have to bear in our minds, that the Buddha had got such an effect. When he talked with men and women, his serene look inspired them with awe and reverence, and his lovely voice struck them with rapture and amazement. You see, this is how we begin to feel the personality of the Buddha. Not only his looks were so serene that when we looked at the Buddha, it inspired awe and reverence. Even today, even if we have this the Buddha available in the form of his statues or murtis, and you see, we of course don't know the first artist who carved the images of the Buddha, but if you look at even the carved image of the Buddha, the way he has sat with his spine completely vertical manner, his looks, and the serenity that Buddha inspires. It's said that in the history of Buddhism, sometimes the people have been inspired even to look at the Buddha images. Today, if we pay a visit to any Buddhist site where we can witness the images of the Buddha, Ajanta, Ellora, or anywhere place, it inspires something in us. So the artistic imagination of the Buddha that we see today available to us inspires such a profound experience in us. Imagine, the Buddha, the live Buddha, the embodiment of the Dhamma itself. How much serenity he would have inspired in the eyes of those who saw him with their own eyes, who listened to the Buddha with their own ears, and such kind of the presence that the Buddha inspired. The verse number 18, and you see this build up to the book 8 to me is a building up of the faith in the Buddha, the faith in the Siddhartha Gautama, in his human person. When we say Buddhang Saranam Gacchami, we of course go to the for refuge to the Buddha who has awakened to the Dhamma. But at the same time, when we utter these words, we have to think about the Buddha Siddhartha Gautama. The man, the human being just like us, born just like us naturally, and died just like us naturally, but something that in the Siddhartha Gautama. So it's not that when we say Buddhang Saranam Gacchami, we think about the Buddha, we think about the Siddhartha Gautama, as to how we can go towards him, as to how we can be like the Siddhartha Gautama. So you see the verse number 18 is like the summit of the Buddha's accomplishments, in a sense, of his being the teacher of the human beings and the gods. And that's what the verse number 18 says. Who could have converted the robber Angulimal or the cannibal of Atavi? See, this shows the power of the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, to be able to convince even such a person of such a tremendous hate and anger like Angulimal. and the man-eaters of Atavi forest. The Buddha went to the Atavi forest to convert the man-eaters. And we have seen that, Baba Ambedkar has talked about the man-eaters of Atavi. And Angulimal, who could have converted the robber like Angulimal, who slayed so many people in his life? And the man-eaters of Atavi, who could have reconciled King Pasenajit to his queen Mallika by a single word? You see, the Buddha had this tremendous power to reconcile, the conflicting families, the conflicting groups. Who could have done it, to reconcile King Pasenajit to his queen Mallika by a single word? To have come under his spell is to be his forever. You see, so once you come under the spell of the Buddha, you are his forever, isn't it? Once you are in that magnetic field of the Buddha, you cannot escape. Once you are in the awe of the Buddha, you cannot lose him ever. So charming was his personality. So that's about, how the Buddha was in his physical demeanor, in terms of his personality, in terms of his serenity, in terms of his speech, the way he spoke, the way he had this sonorous voice, listening to him at once, we could be, taken by him. So charming was his person. There is so much, if we read the passage again and again, it's not just descriptive. It has got this many layers, as we see in the Buddha and Dhamma of bringing forth the dimension of the Buddha, the Siddhartha Gautama. Now I'm going to turn to the subpart 2, the testimony of the eyewitnesses. So this is what has been handed down from the scriptures, but there is also the testimony of the eyewitnesses. So this traditional view is supported by the testimony of eyewitnesses who saw him and met him while he was alive. So it is not just that something which has been handed over to us by the text, but this is also by the eyewitnesses. So one such eyewitness is a Brahmin by name Sale. After seeing the Blessed One face to face, he uttered the following sentiments in praise of him. So arrived in the Lord's presence, the Brahmin, sitting himself after greetings, scanned the Lord's body for the 2 and 30 marks of a Superman, and in time observed them. So he observed what is traditionally called the 32 marks of a Mahapurush, of the great man. Quite sure now about the presence of the 2 and 30 marks, Sel still did not know whether or not he had enlightenment. But he remembered hearing from old and aged Brahmins, teachers of teachers, that those who became arhats, all enlightened and reveal themselves when their praises are sung, and so he made up his mind to extol the Lord to his face in the following lines of eulogy. So that's what Sailor uttered by the way of eulogy. Perfect of body, goodly, Lord, art thou, well grown, well liking, golden hued, with teeth which gleam luster. Vigor fills the frame, and body's full perfection manifests each single sign that marks a Superman. Clear-eyed and handsome, tall, upright art thou, effulgent as a sun among thy train. You look like the sun among your followers. So debonair, so free, so golden-hued, such a shine on your body. Why waste thy beauty's prime as a hopeless anchorite? So why do you waste your beauty as a hopeless anchorite? As world-wide monarch, thou shouldn't ride in state, and indeed from sea to sea should own thy sway. So your body itself commands, to be the emperor, the monarch of the world, and you can from sea to sea you should own your sway. Proud princess shall thy village headsman be. So all the princes will be your if you become a king or an emperor, this princess, proud princess, will be like the heads of the village. They will be like sarpanch of the villages. If you are the emperor or the king, such is your personality. As sovereign king of kings. So that's how Sale described the Buddha. And Ananda, who attended to the Buddha all the time, described the Buddha like this. Ananda describes the color of his body as exceedingly clear and bright, so much so that the pair of cloth of gold, when placed on the body of the Blessed One, appears to have lost its splendor. You see, the body of the Buddha was such a bright that even if you put the golden, cloth on the body of the Buddha, it paled before the body of the Buddha. And he was such a handsome. His personality was such a lovely personality that no wonder he was called by his opponent a glamour boy. So that was what the Buddha called. He looked so exceedingly handsome, so exceedingly beholding to the eyes that the opponents called him the glamour boy. Now I'm going to go through the subpart 3 of the part 1, which we are studying as his personal appearance, his personality. So we are now looking at the personality of the Buddha, and we have seen as to how Baba Ambedkar has described the man who was the Siddhartha Gautama. So his capacity to lead. Let's look at his capacity to lead. So he was not just the handsomest of the man. He not only had the command over his speech, and he had those power to inspire those who listen to him as well. He had this tremendous capacity to lead, and this is what is subpart 3. The Sangha had no official head, as we have seen in the previous classes. The Blessed One had no authority over the Sangha. So the Blessed One had no authority over the Sangha at all. The Sangha was a self-governing body. The Sangha of the Buddha was a self-governing body, and Buddha had no authority over the Sangha. What was, however, the position of the Blessed One over the Sangha and its members? So what was the position of the Buddha over the Sangha in terms of its membership? What was his position? In this, we have the evidence of Sakuldai and Udai, contemporaries of the Blessed One. They were two famous teachers of the time, Sakuldai and Udai. So we have evidence of them as to what is the authority of the Buddha, how Buddha commanded the Sangha, not as the official head. Once the Lord was staying at Rajagraha in the bamboo grove, Veduvana. One morning, the Lord went into Rajagraha for alms, but deeming the hour too early, he thought of going to Sakuladai in Wanderer's Pleasance, and thither he repaired. He retired. At the time, Sakuladai was sitting with a great company of wanderers who were making a great noise about being and not being. So you see, the Buddha arrived at Sakuladai's place, and there were a lot of wanderers, parivrajakas, and who were talking about, debating about being and non-being. Asti, Nasti, or, these philosophical points, they were debating there. And it was a great noise, as you can imagine, that, so many people are talking among themselves. And it was like, noise there. So when from some way off, Sakuladai saw the Lord coming, he hushed his company by saying, "Be quiet, sirs. Do not make a noise. Here comes the recluse Gautama, who is a lover of silence." Shakyamuni. Muni is the silence. So you see, the Buddha was a lover of silence. And this episode shows that the Buddha was not afraid to go anywhere, wherever there were people, even the recluses, Brahmins, or wanderers, parivrajaks, villagers, kings, any assembly, the Buddha was not afraid to go. The Buddha went everywhere he wanted. And he was, one of the qualities of the Buddha was this, that he was not afraid to go in any company, in any assembly, in any conference, in any seminar. The Buddha went just like that. So when Sakuladai saw the Buddha coming, he hushed his company. So there were maybe people around him. He said, "Shh, don't speak. Quiet, be quiet, sirs. Do not make a noise. Here comes the recluse Gautama, who is a lover of silence." So they became silent, and the Lord came up, said Sakuldai, "I pray the Lord to join us. He is truly welcome. It's long time since the last since he last managed to come, pray, be seated. Here is a seat for the Lord. So he was respected by all over. He was respected by all recluses and whoever was a seeker of the truth. They respected the Buddha and they welcomed the Buddha as Sakuladai does here. The Lord sat down accordingly, asking Sakuladai what had been their theme and what was the discussion which had been interrupted. So he said that, what were they discussing? What was the theme of their discussion before he arrived? And, what he interrupted. Verse number 10 says, let that pass for the moment. So let this all noise pass for a moment. Answered Sakuladai, you can easily gather that later on. So when this noise is gone, you can easily gather what was being discussed. Of late, when recluses and Brahmins of other creeds meet together in the discussion hall, Sabhagraha, the topic was mooted, what a good thing, what a very good thing for the Magadha people in Anga, that such recluses and Brahmins, all at the head of co-fraternities or followings, all well-known and famous teachers, all founders of saving creeds, held in high repute by many people, should have come to spend the rainy season at Rajagraha. See, this is the scene of the rainy season, just like that, this which is going on. And all the recluses and all the wanderers of the time, they were coming to Rajagraha for their vassa. So you see, imagine a scene that, in Rajagraha, the big city of the time, so many recluses and Brahmins, and not Brahmins, they are not mentioned because they were not practicing such kind of the vassa, because they were home dwellers. And there were many in the ancient India that went for vassavas, and they met in the discussion halls, and the topic of that, what is a good thing, what is a very good thing for the Magadhan people of Anga. So that was the topic of the discussion at that time. So we see this tradition in the ancient India among the many groups of the philosophers and the teachers to spend their time in Vassa. And in Rajagraha, at that time, they were all assembled, including the Buddha. So now there was Purana Kassapa, Makkali Gosal, Ajit Kesakambal, Pakhuda Kachayana, Sanjay Belati Putta, and Nataputta, the Niganta. So these are all famous 6 schools at the time of the Buddha, which were having their vassa. So there was Purana Kassapa, Makkali Gosai, another very famous teacher, Ajita Kesakambala, Pakhuda Kachayana. We have seen all their philosophical systems in the Buddhism discussed by Baba Ambedkar in the previous classes in the beginning of the Buddhism. We have seen all their philosophies and how the philosophy of the Buddha, teaching of the Buddha was different from the 6 schools of the time. They were very famous. They commanded a lot of respect. Like Sanjay Belatiputta was very famous. His disciples were Sariputra and Mahamogla, and before they became the disciples of the Buddha. Makkali Gosal was one of the persons whose teaching led to the development of Charvak or Lokayata. And they were all famous teachers. Now, which of these lords, which of these recluses and Brahmins of such eminence as teachers is esteemed, respected, venerated, and adorned by his disciples? And on what terms of esteem and respect do they live with him? So this is what was, discussed. Said some. So some of the people said, Purana Kassapa gets no esteem or respect, no veneration or adoration from his disciples. They live with him on no terms of esteem and respect. So about Purana Kassapa, it was said that he gets no esteem or respect, no veneration or adoration from his disciples. They live with him on no terms of esteem and respect. So that was what being taught about Purana Kassapa. Time was when, as he was preaching his doctrine to some hundreds of his following, a disciple broke in with, "Don't question Purana Kassapa who does not know about it. Ask me who do. I will explain everything to your reverence." With arms outstretched, Purana Kassapa tearfully remonstrated, saying, "Do be quiet, sirs, do not make noise." So the subpart 3 ends here, which shows that, the Buddha commanded such a respect, not only among his own followers, not only among his own disciples, but also among the other groups or the companies of the wanderers. And that is what is, about the speciality of the Buddha, because he has this capacity to lead. So even he was not the official head of what is called the Sangha, he still had this command, he still had this respect, he still had this leadership of the people, not which was not just confined to his own Sangha, but other companies of the groups of the people also had this tremendous acknowledgement of the capacity of the Buddha to lead. So what we saw today in this class, in the book 8, in the part 1, which talks about his personality, we have talked about his personal appearance, as to how the Buddha looked personally, in terms of his person, in terms of his voice, in terms of his speech. And we also saw the testimony of the eyewitnesses, and we also saw his capacity to lead the group of the people. So this is what we all saw today in this part 1 of the book 8 of the Buddha and Dhamma. So I will stop here and I will open up the class for any reflections, any comments from you all. So any comments, any reflection by anybody?
Namo Buddhaya.
Yes.
I'm Dr. Sundar here.
Yes.
About the personality of the Buddha, whatever is mentioned in his 32 Lakkhanas, I have read that he had a 40 number of teeth. They were very white and bright, shining, and they were very evenly placed. And it used to give him, whenever he used to smile, those teeth used to look like a pearl, like shining pearls. And this is the explanation what I have read. So I just wanted to share with you all.
Right.
And on this topic, one of the student of Mumbai University, he was an art student. So he has prepared the photograph, and according to, he has drawn the his number of teeth, and accordingly he has prepared the face of the Buddha, which is really very attractive, and it really looks like a lion, like a Siha. He had his lower, the mandible was placed like a lion, and his teeth and overall appearance. I have got those photographs, and I will share with you all in future. It's really, his appearance was really very attractive and impressive. That much I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
Right. Sometimes if you begin to imagine the Buddha with his 32 marks, I think we have to take these 32 marks of a Mahapurusha with a pinch of salt, in a sense that, if you try to figure out the Buddha in terms of what is described in the traditional texts, it will look like a completely different human being, and maybe some kind of a singular sort of human being. And I think what is important here is to I found it interesting that that Baba Ambedkar used the word his personality, and though he talked about his physical appearance, he has talked about his personality, as to how the Buddha was as a person. The way he spoke, the way he carried himself, the way he he was serene, the way he was a Muni, he loved silence, as Baba Ambedkar says. The way his personality itself had this power to lead the other human beings with his example, of course. And I think physical appearance is great, and as I told, as we talked about the Buddha images, they are very serene, very beautiful, and they have this quality to make us feel settled and calm and quiet. There are images in Ajanta, for example. There is one very beautiful image where from you see a smiling Buddha. From one side you see a Buddha who is deep in meditation, from another side. If you look at from the front, it looks very different, very mystical sort of a image of the Buddha. So you see, this is very beautiful, his physical description, but at the same time, we have to be able to relate to him in terms of his personality. And I think that's what Baba Ambedkar does. He inspires us to have the faith in the Buddha, to have the Shraddha in the Buddha, but also at the same time, he motivates us that we can follow in his personality. And I think that's the genius of Baba Ambedkar here. He makes the Buddha accessible to us, all of us. It's a good point.
We have seen that Buddha was very handsome and glamour boy. Still, he did not pay attention to his physical appearance. From the verse, it is obvious that when Vakkali comes to see him, then Buddha says to him that Yomam pasati saddamam somam pasati Vakkali. Apassa mano saddamam yam pasati na pasati. Means those who see me, they should see the Dhamma. Otherwise, even if they see me and they don't understand Dhamma, then it is as if they have not seen
me. Rightly said. The other classes are going to be very interesting. It's not that we are at the end of the Buddha and his Dhamma. There is so much to explore in terms of the teachings. So as I often say, that every single page matters to us, every single word matters to us, and every sentence, that needs reflection. So this part, it looks descriptive, but if we begin to read it again and again, we begin to see the appearance of the Buddha's personality itself. So if
Devim, sir.
Yes, please go on.
Sir, I had a question. Dr. Ambedkar had very beautifully explained the personality of Buddha in this. And you said that the reference is taken from scriptures and traditional texts. So which are these scriptures and traditional texts? Can you specify that?
See, I think I have to go back to, these references. We have three references now. Vasant Mun Sahab has done some. Badant Anand Kaushalyan has done some. There is a book, Akash Singh Rathod has done some along with another author. And I'm sure that, we can find the reference of this in the Vinay Pitak. In the Vinay Pitak, you can find about, the lifestyle of the Buddha. When did he get up? What did he do throughout the day? You can find in the suttas some of the description of how the people were inspired just to look at him, and so on and so forth. So not exact sources we know, but we can definitely find out.
All right, sir. And so one more query I have.
Yes.
In this second part, the testimony of eyewitnesses, there is this point number 4. But he remembered hearing from old and aged Brahmins, teachers of teachers, that those who became arahats. So what is the meaning of this word arahats?
See, arahats are like, there are different levels of freedoms which are described in Buddhism, which comes from the removal of fetters. And if we remove 3 kinds of fetters about your, what is called the Satkaditti, the doubts, and Silavat Paramarsh. These are technical terms which we have maybe touched upon in the previous classes. So, there are different degrees of freedom, and Arahat is somebody who is completely free, totally free. And for example, the person who has broken the 3 fetters, they are called the Shotagami, in a sense that Sotapanna, in a sense that they are definitely going to be free, because they have seen the truth, they have seen the freedom. And then there are there's the Vikans, the person who becomes Shotapanna, and then there is Sakruta-gamini, then Anagami, and Arhat. So Arhat is the final stage of when you break all the bondages, all the fetters, 10 fetters that are described in the Buddhist scheme of freedom, right?
All right. And sir, these 32 qualities that are mentioned here.
What?
Sir, there was a mention of 32 qualities that were in the personality of Buddha. 32 marks, 32 signs.
Yeah. There are 32 marks, major marks. There are 80 minor marks, and you can see them. Even if you Google, you can see them. These marks of the Buddha. But I think what we have to do ultimately is to let go the physical Buddha, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And try to embody the Buddha within, isn't
Correct. We have to emulate the ideology more than the physical form.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Rahul here means these are not the marks, the 32 marks and the 18 minor marks. These are not the things which make the Buddha great.
True.
What makes the Buddha great? That is his Dhamma.
Yes.
And that's what Buddha also quoted and Baba Sahib also quoted. Means
Yes.
when another thing is just regarding the Arhat, what you explained, but the same actually the meaning literally, if we can see Ari Hanta. Ari means these fetters, what you said, and Hant means he is destroying that fetters.
Beautiful.
So Ari Hant. And later there is a secondary meaning. Now the word is in Hindi and Marathi, that is we called Arhat. So he is eligible. So means in the Buddhist context point of view, who has overcome these fetters, who has destroyed this fetter, he is eligible. And now the word is also in prevalence, and that we called as Arhat. In Marathi, actually, in newspaper, we filed Arhata, means eligibility. So that's derived from that word.
Very good, very beautiful. Eligible to become the Buddha.
Yes.
It's good.
Perfect.
Very good, very good.
Got it, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much for the explanation.
Very good, Rahul.
Yeah, I want to say something.
Yes.
See, about the 32 marks of the great person, if you see scientifically, those marks means like today's science, when you compare with the 32 marks, those marks are definitely, they are not ideal. They are very different. And if you imagine with the 32 a person with the 32 marks, it is very different, which is not exactly the what we have seen about the Buddha. So we should forget about his physical things, and we should take it as what he has taught instead of what he was. It is better to learn and follow the path what he has taught.
Very good.
I feel so.
Very good. But as a Buddhist, we are interested in how the Buddha looked like, how was his personality, and I think this is very good in a sense of coming to the end of the Buddha and his Dhamma in the book 8. Baba Sahib Ambedkar brings back the Buddha, and I find it very interesting. So this personal connection with the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, personal affiliation, to know him, to behold him, and I think there is a meditation practice which is called the Buddhanusmriti, where we cultivate the mindfulness of the Buddha, and about his qualities in a sense. And we know when we chant the what is called the Buddha Vandana, we enumerate various qualities of the Buddha, isn't it? And same with the Sanghanusmriti, same with Dhammanusmriti, Shilanusmriti. Then there is a smriti of the great beings, the understanding the biographies of the great people, which we can say Devanusmriti, and like biography of Sariputra, Mogglayan, and all these special people who appear in the world, and knowing their lives. So I find it's very interesting to think about the Buddha in a sense of remembering the Buddha, thinking about the Buddha, cultivating the mindfulness of the Buddha. And in the Chinese or Japanese traditions, there is a school which says that just thanking the Buddha is enough. Just to be in the presence of the Buddha is enough. Just to put our mind at the service of the Buddha is enough. And surrendering the mind to the Buddha is the practice. And every thought surrendering to the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. This is very sophisticated levels of practices that have been developed. There is a school in Buddhism called Sukhavati School, Pure Land Buddhism, where the central practice is to chant the name of the Buddha, and the name of the Buddha which is chanted here is Amitabha Buddha. And this conceptually, if you look at it, Amitabha in terms of the infinite light, and Amitayu, infinite life. So here the light of the Buddha signifies his limitless, boundless wisdom, and the Amitayu, in a sense of life, signifies or referred to the Buddha's infinite, boundless compassion. So wisdom and compassion, is there, and the nature of the reality is not limitless, is boundless, is having no bounds, as it were, in terms of its characteristics. So the enlightenment is like the light which has no boundaries, and compassion which has no which is beyond, which touches every life on wherever there is. So boundless light and boundless life is the very essence of the Buddha, even the Shakyamuni Buddha. And this concept, I find it very interesting when we just pay our homage, Namo Amitabha Buddhaya, in a sense of even Namo Buddhaya, paying our homage to the Buddha all the time. And if we can do it with a singular, sincere, true mind, express our gratitude towards the Buddha, in terms of his qualities of wisdom and compassion. It's very deep, in a sense of paying our gratitude to the Buddha. So by the way of paying our gratitude to this Buddha, who is boundless in terms of his wisdom and compassion, as captured in the word Amit, is something that is a very profound sort of a practice, which is practiced in Japanese and Chinese culture. It says that it has gone from India itself, that surrendering our mind to the Buddha all the time. And when we think about the Buddha in this way, opening our mind and body to the very experience of the Buddha, has become a very profound practice. And said in the world there are the most followers of the Buddhism. If we take China, Japan, every country together, they come from this tradition of paying their respect, chanting his name sincerely and with true mind. Itself is a spiritual practice. So I think remembering the Buddha is a very important practice, isn't it? So this is what is being hinted here in, I think, in this book 8.
And also in Tripitaka, it is written that before Gautam Buddha, 28 Buddhas were born, and they used to describe the Buddha in same particular fashion.
Yes. See, I don't know. Milinda Prashant said that when you are dying, if you utter the name of the Buddha, it's like a ship which can carry you through. I don't know. It's just written in the Buddhanism. The Buddha name Buddha has got such a significance. And you see, we have seen, just hearing the name of the Buddha, how Sudatta, another Pindaka, he left in the middle of the night, in the middle of the forest, to just seek the Buddha, knowing that the Buddha is near. So this profound sort of, some of the Shabdas have such a profound impact on people. They become so special in the history. So I think there is something special about the Buddha and even the name Buddha. So I think we will stop here for today. And
Sure.
Anything, Umesh?
Yeah, only one thought that I came into the mind just
Yeah,
during.
please.
Not only Buddha's teaching is useful, Buddha's mudras and statues are conveying lot. Means silently, it is conveying a lot of things regarding the compassion and kindness.
Yes. So thank you so much for joining.
Dhamma Sahib also has given importance to physical appearance. He used to dress so nicely, and he was very particular about his dressing.
Yes.
Things he had.
Beautifully said. So let's meet up next class. Thank you so much. Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.
Jai Bhim, sir.
Jai Bhim.